If I were to ask you to do a Kegel or a pelvic floor contraction, what is the first cue that comes to your mind? A lot of people have heard the cue, imagine that you have to pee and try to stop the flow of urine. That is a really good cue to use when you're learning how to engage your pelvic floor muscles. But did you know that with that cue, you're more than likely going to engage more of the muscles at the anterior portion of your pelvic floor? Now, your pelvic floor is more so shaped like a bowl. So that means there's also a posterior portion to your pelvic floor. When it comes to strengthening the posterior portion, some people may need a different cue in order to better engage those muscle fibers in that region. A cue that you can give individuals is imagine that you have gas, and I want you to try to hold in the gas. Now, if you feel yourself wanting to bear down and push, then you're not doing this properly. And that is what I noticed a lot of people doing when I asked them to try to hold in gas, pretending that they have gas when we're trying to activate the muscles directly around the rectal region. So instead, what I'll tell people to do is to imagine that the rectum is a straw. And I want you with that straw to try to suck up rice or blueberries, anything that you're able to suck up using your rectum. So now with that cue, what you're going to do is you're going to take a nice deep breath in. And as you exhale, that's where I want you to try to activate your rectum, pretending it's a straw, and try to grab and suck up the grains of rice, blueberries, whatever you may be imagining. If you need additional cues, don't worry, we're getting ready to go over an exercise using the information I just gave you, so that way you can better sense these muscles and make sure you are doing it properly. If you don't already have a towel nearby, I want you to go ahead and take a moment and pause the video and grab a hand towel, something that you can fold in this position here, so into a rectangle, and that we can just easily roll up. Because we're going to sit on this towel so that way we're able to sense how the pelvic floor muscles are moving. So if you don't have your towel, pause the video and join again in just a minute. So once you have your towel, I want you to roll your towel from a rectangle into more of a cylinder form. And then I'm going to have you sit directly on your towel. So you're going to place it directly in between your legs here, and you're going to sit on top of that. As you're sitting on top of that, you'll probably notice that you have the towel pushing up into that genital area. With the towel pushing up into the genital area, we can use this as a cue to make sure the pelvic floor is lengthening and also contracting as we work on improving the strength and mobility of the pelvic floor. We're going to focus predominantly on the posterior fibers, so more so the muscles that are around the rectal region. With the cue I gave you earlier in the video, where I asked you to imagine that the rectum's a straw and try to suck up grains of rice, a blueberry, whatever it may be, I want you to use that cue now in just a moment, because we're going to take that deep breath in, and on our exhale, I want you to pretend that your straw is sucking that material up. So first, you're going to take a nice deep breath, not using your shoulders, but expanding through the belly. So nice deep breath in. And on your exhale, you're going to try to suck up with your straw. Good. And relax. Now, as you try to suck up with that straw, what you should feel if you're sitting down doing this exercise is you should feel those muscles gently lifting away from the towel. And when you relax and let go, you should feel those muscles drop back down. Now, you're not going to get as much movement as what I showed with my hand. That was more so just so you can get a visual idea as to what's occurring. But each time you're contracting your pelvic floor, those muscles should move up towards you. And each time you relax the pelvic floor, especially during that inhalation, when you're taking that deep breath in, the pelvic floor muscle should lengthen, dropping down into that towel. If you're not noticing much movement in this position, it can be for different reasons. One reason is that pelvic floor muscles may be tight, but you also could have a weak pelvic floor, which oftentimes does go along with having a tight pelvic floor. So if you notice that in a seated position, you're not able to sense this as well, go ahead and try this same exercise laying down on your back or even on your side. In those positions, you won't be able to have the towel in place like we have here, but you can at least begin to start to acknowledge and recognize the movement of those muscles. So remember, as you're trying to contract those muscles, don't hold your breath, but use your breath to help you figure out where those muscles are. And each time you inhale, everything should kind of expand and be more relaxed. And with each exhale, that is when you want to try to suck up with the straw. You just learned how to contract more of the muscles on the posterior portion of your pelvic floor. Now, the pelvic floor muscles, they do help with different things such as urinary continence, supporting our pelvic organs, including the uterus in women and also the bladder and rectum in both men and women. Pelvic floor is also responsible for sexual pleasure and other things of that nature. So the pelvic floor muscles are very important, especially the ones that we just talked about on the backside, because they help you control bowel continence. So if you're someone who's struggling with bowel continence, even if it's gas incontinence and you're noticing that you're having a hard time keeping gas in or keeping your stool in, that you want to make sure that you can properly engage those muscles. And the exercise we just went through can help you start with that. Now, that's just a starting point. This video here is simply meant to educate you. And if you're not already working with a pelvic floor therapist, I highly encourage that you seek one out so that way you can make sure that this exercise is not just appropriate for you, but you're also doing it properly.